Hey you. You, I'm talking to you. How are you? This is Bill. Who are you? I hope you're doing all right. It's a sunny day here in MiniConcert28, Massachusetts. I have, I think I told you I have 4 hives, and one of my hives has turned very aggressive. I don't know, sometimes I guess the queen makes bees that are just, there's a strain in them that's aggressive, like they follow you around. And every time we go out in the yard now, these scout bees that are looking around, they come and they buzz around our heads. So it's kind of been this really weird thing. Like Debbie goes out in the garden and they buzz her in the garden, which is absolutely not allowed. Like, if that was what was going to happen, then the bees would go. The bees would have to go before the garden. So you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm off the subject. I'm probably going to have to go in there. I think it's the queen's fault, which means she's laying eggs, and the bees, everyone that comes out is going to be aggressive. I'm going to have to find a bee and get rid of her. It's horrible. The queen. And then I'll put a new queen in there. But it's kind of exciting. So that's what's been going around our house. One of the many things. So listen, I'm going to tell you this story today that I actually never perform. I've been going over it this week, so we'll see how I do. And it's a recording I made from a recording I made years ago when my kids were little, and they're not little anymore. They're both in their 30s, guys in their 30s. When we would go out, Debbie and I would go out, and we'd say they can listen to music. They have a bunch of cassettes of all these people we know that make great kids music. But Debbie would say, don't put on Bill's music. It makes them too wild. All right? And I guess maybe that was true. So people kept saying, when are you going to make an album of stories to listen to so kids can calm down? So I finally did. My kids were mostly grown by then, but I finally made one. It's called The Town Around the Bend. And then I made another one about this town. And I imagined living in the town, this town that I would like to live in, where things go wrong, but then they get right again, because people work together to figure it out. And it's kind of silly. The stories are silly in there. When I was thinking of the town, I actually thought of the town called the Village of Liver and Onions. Have you ever heard of the Village of Liver and Onions? So the Village of Liver and Onions was made up by a poet and writer, Carl Sandburg, and he wrote stories for his kids called the Rutabaga Tales. And he talked about a village of liver and onions. And he had a whole bunch of really weird stories, like when Henry Hagley Hogley played his accordion, all kinds of weird things. So I'm going to tell you a story from my recording of that. And since it is a bedtime story, I figured I'd better write some lullabies. So I'm going to play you one of those here before I tell you the story. But I don't think you're going to go to sleep during the story, because I really like this story, right? So here's the song. Look out your window, what do you see? The stars are shining for you and me. They shine like silver, they glow like pearls, sparkle like diamonds above the world. And every star is like a story waiting to be told. And every star is like a song sung that never grows old. See him turning in the heavens, see him wheeling in the sky, watching over you till sunrise. When they say goodbye. every star is like a story waiting to be told. And every star is like a song sung that never grows old. See 'em turning in the heavens, see 'em wheeling in the sky, watching over you till sunrise when they say goodbye. So there's that. Are you asleep? Are you with me? Okay. Oh wait, let's do birthdays first, okay? I just got a couple. First of all, Enid in Georgia. He turned 6 on Thursday, last Thursday. I forgot to say it. We were busy. I don't know what I was busy. I just missed it. Okay, and you're watching today, right, Enid? Okay, happy birthday. I hope it was good. So this is your second birthday of the year. Happy birthday. And also, Liliana Smith. Liliana, don't know where you are. Maybe someone will tell us. On July 16th. Okay, so I'm not going to be here on the 16th. Liliana's turning 9, which I like 9. I was thinking about 9 because I'm working on another story, actually, that I'm going to perform tomorrow night for Storytelling Live, Storytelling Arts in Indiana. Actually, if you're interested in watching the show, you can do that. It's about a family trip I took when I was 9 with my family, a vacation. Actually, I say it's a family trip and not a vacation. They're very different, especially if you have parents. It was a family trip, and I was a terror on that trip. Anyway, happy birthday, Liliana. So, in this town, I imagine I live in this town, the town around the bend. Oh, wait, let me get my hat. Because there's a character in the story that needs this hat, I think. There's a lot of strange people in this town. They're all great, but they're strange. And one of the people that was around when I was growing up, she always wanted to pay attention to. His name was Bucket of Beans. It's a weird name for a kid, you know? But he didn't seem to mind it. Because when he introduced himself and said, "My name is Bucket of Beans," people would laugh. And he kind of liked that. But you know how it is about names, that, you know, after you hear it 6 or 7 times, it's just not that weird anymore. It's just his name, Bucket of Beans. And his sister, he had a sister whose name was Clarisse, which isn't that weird. So it just goes to show you, just because one person has a weird name in the family doesn't mean everybody has a weird name in the family. Although maybe you think Clarisse is a weird name, in which case you would think that Bucket of Beans is not that weird a name. Or maybe if you just say it 6 or 7 times, it wouldn't sound weird anymore. I mean, any name could be weird or not weird. You could horse nut or wing head or whatever, you know? But anyway. So Bucket of Beans was kind of an interesting kid, and I was always be interested in what happened to him. And this is what he told me happened to him once. One day, Bucket of Beans and his sister Clarisse were at home, and his parents had to go out for errands. And so they called him into the kitchen. They said, "Bucket of Beans and Clarisse, we have to go out and do errands. We have to go to the dry cleaners, and we have to go to the hardware store, and we have to go to the tongue cleaners. And we're going to be a while. And while we are away, do not go down into the basement where our tools are. And do not touch any of those tools down there or those machines, because they are for us. And do not do anything you are not supposed to do." And Bucket of Beans and Clarisse looked up at their mom and dad and said, "Okay, Mom and Dad." And their mother and father looked at each other and said, "We have such nice children. They're so good." And they left. Are you with me? What do you think happened? Yeah. As soon as their parents left, they went down in the basement. I know. You're not supposed to do that. But stories are filled with things that are not supposed to happen. And this is the first of those in this story. They went down to the basement, and there, in the basement, they saw it. Their parents' bubble machine. See, in the town around the bend, Bucket of Beans and Clarisse's parents were in charge of making bubbles.
They made bubbles for bubble bath, and they made bubbles for birthday parties, and they made bubbles that come out when people are washing their hands. And they would put them in bubble boxes and bubble bags and bubble wrap. And that was their job. So once a month they would make all these bubbles for all the people in the town that needed bubbles. But a bubble machine is an adult machine. It's not a kid's machine. And Clarisse and Bucket of Beans were told never to touch that machine, but they went down and they looked at it. It was this big white thing, and it had all these knobs and dials and buttons on it. And Clarisse said, "I wonder how it works." And Bucket of Beans said, "By magic." And he was right. Because as soon as he said that, the machine started to burble and burp, and it spoke. It said, "What size bubbles would you like?" And without thinking, because they had not been thinking, or they would not have been down there, Bucket of Beans said, "Big ones." And as soon as they said that, the machine said, "How many would you like?" And Clarisse, without thinking, said, "1 billion." And the machine burbled again and said, "When would you like them?" And I hope if you ever run into a bubble machine, and you might, you never know, you don't say what Bucket of Beans said, because there's going to be a problem. And there was. He said, "Right now." Yeah. And so it did. Yeah. At first, it was just one bubble, and then another one. They're just coming out of the bubble hole very slowly, and they would catch them on their hands and they would pop them. But then more and more and more poured out. And they said, "That's enough." But those were not the magic words. And if there were magic words, they didn't know what they were. And soon they filled up the floor of the basement. And Bucket of Beans and Clarisse didn't know what to do, and so they ran upstairs, and the bubbles followed after them into the kitchen. Now, when you've done something wrong, there are many things you could do. And one of them is run. And that's what they did. They ran out the back door. But unfortunately, it was a huge flood of bubbles. And they came out the back door, came pouring out the door, out the windows. And they stood watching as their yard filled up with bubbles. And then there was a huge boom. And they looked up and they saw that bubble machine exploding out of the chimney, up in the air. Bubbles flying everywhere. And it landed with a clank and a crash right in the middle of the street. And the bubbles settled down all around the house. And Bucket of Beans and Clarisse looked at the machine, and Clarisse said, "I think we have done our last doing." And Bucket of Beans said, "I think we might be in trouble." And just then, they heard something. "Rags! Bring out your rags!" Oh, they looked down the street and they saw him coming down the street. It was Tom the Rag Man. He was pulling his cart. Tom the Rag Man, he gathered rags, but he gathered all sorts of things that were broken. He brought broken bicycles and broken spaghetti strainers, even broken hearts, broken ideas, lost messages. And he put them in his cart and he took them back to his home to wait for them to come back together again. And he came down the cart, and he came down the street, and he saw Bucket of Beans and Clarisse stand there looking. He said, "Oh, looks like somebody's gone down into the basement even though they shouldn't have, and they've broken the bubble machine and asked for 1 billion bubbles, and it exploded, flown up the air, and now it's lying here, and now they're deciding whether they should move to another country or tell their parents." And they looked at their faces, and their faces were so sad. They started to cry. It looked like their faces were going to fall off their heads. And he said, "Tears are fine for staying, but not for moving on. Because when the tears stay, you can't see the blue sky and find out what happens next. So help me." And then he began to pile all those broken pieces of the bubble machine into his cart. And he was right. Because in a minute or two, Bucket of Beans and Clarisse, even though they didn't know what was going to happen, and if it was a good idea, and what the point of it was, they began to put things in the cart, and soon they felt not quite so bad. He said, "Well, we'll see what we have." And he started to walk down the street. pulling the cart behind him. He said, I'll be back when it's something new. They said, when are you coming back? But he was singing a song. Down by the sea where the waves come in, there's a itty bitty fish with a rainbow fin. That flipped and flopped and flipped it again. Down by the sea where the waves come in. Bucket Bean said, when are you coming back? He said, I'll come back when it's finished, when it's made into something new. They said, what should we do? He said, well, I would suggest if you live in your house, you should clean up the bubbles. And when your parents come back, you should tell them the truth. Because it's always harder to remember what did not happen than it is to remember what did happen. And I can tell you that the bubble machine will come back, but it will not be a bubble machine again. And he walked off down the street, singing, down by the sea where the waves come in. They watched him go away. So they decided to clean up the bubbles before their parents came back. Well, it just so happened, just at that moment, a huge wind came and it blew the bubbles, all the bubbles in the yard, all the bubbles covering the house, on the roof, just blew them over the tops of the trees and they were gone. And that meant the only bubbles left were in the house. So they went in the house. And first they began to pop them with their fingers, but there were thousands and thousands and even millions of bubbles. And pretty soon they began to sweep up the bubbles and put them in the garbage cans until the garbage cans were full. And then of course, they flushed them down the toilet. It must be done. And then they got the vacuum cleaner and they swept them up and they were sticking them any place they could find until finally there were just 100 bubbles left. And they didn't know what to do with them. And they remembered that there was a cupboard in their kitchen that their parents never went into. And so they gathered all those bubbles up like they were shaggy sheepdogs gathering up little sheep. And they opened up the cupboard and they put them up there on the top shelf and they shut the door. And the bubbles seemed like they were gone. And just at the moment, their parents came in the front door. They said, we're home. They said, why, look at this place. You must have been cleaning up. It looks nicer than it did when we left. Now, you know, if you remember what Tom, the ragman, said, it's always harder to remember what you didn't do than what you did do. It might have been a good idea just to say, we went down into the basement and we asked for 1 billion bubbles and the bubble machine broke up and exploded and now Tom the ragman has it and it's going to come back but it's not going to be a bubble machine. They could have said that, but they didn't. They said, we know. And I don't know if you can blame them. Now, are you with me? You know what you're afraid of. You're afraid their parents are going to go right down in the basement and find out the bubble machine is missing, right? But they didn't, because they had just made bubbles recently and they only made it about once a month. So there was no reason to go down and check out the bubble machine. So everything seemed fine. And every day or two, their parents look at each other and they say, we have such good children. And Bucket Beans and Clarisse would smile at each other. But sometime during each day, they would walk down the street and through the town and over the hill on the far side of the town, on the other side of the baseball field where everybody plays baseball when they can. They would have found Tom sitting in his yard, looking out his yard at all the broken things, waiting to come back together again. And they say, where is the bubble machine? Where is the bubble machine? We need the bubble machine. He said, it's not a bubble machine anymore, and it's not together. And when it's time for it to be together, it will be together. And Bucket of Beans said, but we need it now. And he said, if it's not together, then you don't need it yet. And he would sing his song, down by the sea, where the waves come in, there's a little funny little fish with a rainbow fin. And they would leave and come back and hope that maybe the next day the bubble machine would be ready. Until one day, in a story, there's always an until, or a but, or and then, but, one day. They had just finished their breakfast, and their dad got up from the kitchen table and he said, well, I think it's time to make my world-famous sugar cookies on my world-famous sugar cookie pan. Bucket of Beans and Clarisse looked at each other. They'd never heard of their father's world famous sugar cookies, and they told him that. He said, that's because in all this time that you have been alive on this planet, I've been so busy, I have not had time to make my world famous sugar cookies, and I'm going to make them in my world famous sugar cookie pan. The day is a day. And he started to go to the cupboard that they had never opened. He said, my famous sugar cookie pan is up. And they said, no, no, no. And Bucket of Beans said, we don't like sugar cookies. And he said, you haven't had my world famous sugar cookies. And Clarisse said, I think you should just use a regular pan. And their father said, well, then it would not be a world famous sugar cookie because it's a world famous sugar cookie pan. And they said, no. But he pulled open the cupboard door. And when he did that, bubbles came bouncing and bounding out. They came pouring out, and they poured on his head and bounced on his shoulders and surrounded him on the floor. And he looked at them and he said, what have we here? And just then, to make things even worse, their mother had gone down into the basement because that today was the day that she had to make more bubbles. And they heard her call from down there, where is the bubble machine? And she came running up the stairs into the kitchen, and she saw Bucket of Beans and Clarisse and their dad standing there. Their dad standing there with bubbles on his shoulder, all around his feet, and even one on the tip of his nose. And it got very quiet. There's a moment when things go wrong. When you don't know what's going to happen. And everybody's waiting to see how someone's going to act when they realize things have gone wrong, when something has gone terribly wrong. Whether somebody's going to laugh, or cry, or yell, or giggle, or be mean, or be kind, or be happy, or be sad, or stand on a chair and sing a song from an old movie. And what they do depends on a lot of things. It depends on, what they had for breakfast this morning, and what somebody said to them on the phone a half an hour ago, or whether they had a nice birthday party when they were 6. But in that moment, we don't know what's going to happen. And this was that moment in the story where Bucket of Beans and Clarisse looked at each other, and their mother-father looked at each other, and they all looked at each other. And they looked at each other for a very long time, which is a good thing to do when you don't know how you're supposed to feel. You don't always have to know how you're supposed to feel, and if you're not sure, it's good to wait. It was almost like the whole world had stopped breathing, or at least everybody in the town around the bend, waiting to hear what was going to happen. Their mom and dad looked at each other, and they both said to Bucket of Beans and Clarisse at the same time, why don't you tell us what happened? And then it was like everything breathed. And Tom the Ragman took off his hat, and he scratched his head, and he tied his sneakers, and he got up from his chair. He said, now it's time. And so Bucket of Beans and Clarisse, they told them what had happened. About how after they left, they couldn't help themselves, and they went downstairs, and how they couldn't help themselves, and they saw the machine, and how they asked for big bubbles, and then they asked for 1 billion bubbles, and they asked for them right now, and how they bubbled up. They came up the stairs from the chimney, from the basement. They came out the doors, and then how the bubble machine exploded, and it went up into the air through the chimney and landed, and it was broken, and they tried to clean up all the bubbles, and then the doorbell rang. So all 4 of them, Bucket of Beans, Clarisse, their mom, and their dad, they went to open the front door. And there was Tom the Ragman. He was standing there with this big thing in his cart. It looked like the bubble machine, except it was painted green. And it had bicycle handlebars attached to it. And he said, what is dead is alive again now, but it is not the same. It is reborn. And it will do something different, not better or worse, but different. And he pushed the button, and it began to clank and whir. And the whole where the bubbles used to come out of opened. And something came out, but it wasn't bubbles. No. It was a large red balloon in the shape of a kangaroo. And another second, another balloon came out, but this was shaped like a comet. And then two more came out, both in the shape of hippopotami. And then one that looked a little bit like a piece of chocolate cake. And Tom the Ragman gave one to everybody there and kept one for himself. And Bucket of Beans hugged Clarisse, and Clarisse hugged Bucket of Beans. And their father and their mother said, better than before. Better than before. And maybe it was. And Bucket of Beans and Clarisse promised to never touch the buttons on the balloon machine. And they didn't learn. I mean, they didn't, because sometimes you do learn. You do learn a lesson, and you remember it. And in my town, where I'd like to live, the town around the bend, where you can live too, if you want, there are plenty of balloons now. As many balloons as you want, but not as many bubbles. Although someday, if you open up a cupboard that has not been opened up for a long time, and a bunch of bubbles come out, then you'll know where they came from. And if that's not true, it should be. It's my story from the town around the bend. It's nice to tell it to you. So that's what I got for you today. Let's see, a couple things. I'm going to do one more show for you on Thursday. So here's my plan. Let's kind of do a greatest hits. I can't do the long stories. But if you tell me something that you'd like to hear again, another song, or maybe one of the little stories, let them know, and I'll just spend some time with you on Thursday. We'll just do it for a while, okay? And then I'm going to take a break. I'll be back with some other things. But it's time for me to take a vacation, I think, and I've got a lot of other projects I'm working on, which I'm going to be happy to let you know about. So if you sign up for my mailing list, if you go to my webpage, billharley.com, and sign up, we'll let you know what's going on. And I'll be posting stuff on Facebook and all this Twitter and all those other things. I guess that's it. Tomorrow night I'll be doing a show for adults for Storytelling Arts Live. You can find out about it on my webpage or on Facebook. And thanks for listening, and take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. See you.